Hey everybody, this is Javier Balderramos. I have Mr. Golojuh here. Mr. Golojuh is the author and the author and writer of a book called Paperboy.
I
Not
like
only
the
that
real
is
quick. You said director though, because it did start a long time ago as a screenplay. So the origins of it were as a screenplay. So that kind of makes sense. So that's like fitting. So you're not too far off. The origins of it, it started as a screenplay a long time ago. So
well, you also have a short film called The Illuminator, correct?
that's true. Yes, yes.
So I brought him onto my show so we could talk about this book because we don't talk enough about children's books. We don't talk enough about people that are willing to read anymore. Normally we just have people on and they want something like really quick, and that's not how things work in life. And
Yeah.
thank you for being on.
No, thank you for having me. And I appreciate that. Like I agree. Like I enjoy, there's a lot of short form content out there, and I like everyone else, I spend time on my phone and ingesting some of that stuff. But I appreciate taking time to read a book every now and again, and the it's a novel, The Paperboy, and I wrote it originally, started as a screenplay. And it's kind of funny, the short film, it started both at the same time when I was in graduate school at USC with the same teacher. Her name was Coleman Hough, and Coleman wrote some stuff with the director Steven Soderbergh. Steven Soderbergh, who's the guy who directed like Ocean's 11 and all that stuff. He also he had a kind of a thing where he would do like his sort of thing was like one for me, one for them with like the Hollywood studios, where he'd make like one, like Ocean's 11 type of big movie, and then like one sort of movie for himself. And when he'd work with Coleman, she was kind of one of the people that would make the like indie interesting movie that he'd make for himself. And one of those movies was the movie Full Frontal, and it still had a lot of famous people in it, but it was like a different kind of weird movie. And if you watch it, weird maybe not the word, but like it didn't like have a lot of edits in it. It was an early movie shot on digital video before that was like a normal thing. And Coleman was one of my teachers, and she really thought differently and wasn't traditional like normal like storytelling technique. So it really pushed me in different ways. And I think I like traditional stories, and I still do, but originally it was a screenplay, and that helped me like figure out a structure to a story. But like kind of like you said, people that can spend time with us something, and I sort of stopped. And when I wrote the first version as a script, it was the story was there, but then it was like, oh, I wanted to spend more time in that world. And so then I sort of expanded it into the novel to like just spend more time in that world and be there more for myself at first, and then hopefully now for other people to share it with the rest of the world.
So Paperboy is a superhero genre book, correct?
Yeah, so it is not in the traditional sense. So it's so I'll show you the cover here. So this is the Paperboy, and what you see here is it's technically the genre is young adult paranormal, and it's set in the mid 90s. And what you have here is you see the taller kid is Daniel, and he is the Paperboy of the title, and the shorter kid here is the Corpse Boy, and he gets his nickname of the Corpse Boy by the Paperboy Daniel. And one day Daniel's, this at the beginning of the story, you would read this. Daniel's sort of chased by bullies, and he encounters and finds the body of Oliver. And it's this is sort of the dark side, but it is still for the younger readers that his body, and then he becomes a ghost that haunts Daniel throughout the rest of the story. And they have to sort of find out, how did Oliver die? That we later learn his name is Oliver, the Corpse Boy. How did he die? And they sort of go through this journey together, and it's sort of how Daniel here becomes the Paperboy in that superhero sense. But as they reflect on their love of superheroes, their shared love of these characters, and it's full of references to it. I see your hat is the Legend of Zelda. There's
Zelda,
like
of
specific
course.
references in here too. There's a reference in here. I wish I knew the specific page too, because it's set in Pennsylvania where I grew up. We were just talking about the cold weather, and it's set in Pennsylvania, and it talks about like the dungeons in Zelda. And there's like a reference in this book to that, and there's a lot of references to like pop culture, video games, stuff like that all throughout the book, and most of it is like superhero references because that's kind of the foundation of it. And I do see it mostly as a superhero book, and one of the quotes in here is from a writer named Tom Perotta, and Tom is a writer who's most famous for the movie Little Children and the book Little Children, both of which he wrote, and he was actually nominated for an Oscar. And Tom was helpful in me figuring out like sort of the right audience for the book. And
Like he kind of guided you in a sense.
yeah, and he
Yeah.
like yeah, and he but his quote was great because he said he really helped me figure out like the superhero genre too, like because I just wrote the story of like, you know, this two friends on an adventure, right? And like not really thinking about it, and he kind of like saw what it was like, and you said the superhero thing, and sort of seeing that through it, but it's within the like how people love all this superhero stuff, and you know, they're not superheroes in the sense that they have powers, but they're superheroes in the sense that they do good in the for a friend without their powers, but they reflect on these superheroes. And in the world there's references to all the stuff that, you know, you and I love, right? And like, well, like your hat, Zelda, the stuff like I'm in my garage. Actually, this is a garage.
Well, I see your background.
Yeah,
See the
so
background
this is the
video
back wall of
games.
our garage. To my right is our
It's like
car.
the man cave right there.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of both things. Totally, it's like the man cave. We used to live in a place. We're not far. We're in Anaheim, but we're now moved over to just like a couple cities over here, and closer to my kids' school. And we went from a bigger place because it was a townhouse to like a house. We have like a bigger yard, but like less space. And so we traded some of the space for that yard. But so I'm like, we have a lot of our stuff that was in the house, but I'm like, where do I put it? So I'm like, oh, I'll just put it in the garage. So, so it's now decorating the garage. But this is kind of the Disney side, which is more like kind of my wife's stuff. I enjoy Disney, especially the vintage stuff. I love the old like posters and stuff. But that side, which you kind of see some of it to like this side where the arcade is more of like where you see like the vintage collection and toys and stuff. So it's kind of hit on that side, but it's like, you know, more that way. But like the characters, they love those things, and there's reference to the like stuff from our world, but there's also references to stuff that I created for the story, like things that you know, specifically that help tell the story, like superheroes that I describe it this way. I read a quote that J.R.R. Tolkien talking about Lord of the Rings, and he was saying how like someone said, oh, is, you know, the Lord of the Rings set in our world in a different time or something? And he said, it's our world in another state of imagination. And I love that quote. And I think of like the books, the same thing. It's like, this is like 1995 or whatever, not in like another world or something, like in another state of imagination, right? Where there's, you know, Zelda is still a game, but there's, you know, comic books and movies and things that only exist in the world of this book, that I created for the world of this book, because then they say things that help tell the story very uniquely. And a couple of those comic books that I created, one called Young Zombie that I actually created. So I have a publisher for the book, but for the comic books, I did myself via Kickstarter, one so far called Young Zombie. I have another one hopefully soon called The Burrow. Hopefully in March, I'll have that one out. My birthday is in March, so that's my goal, is to like have that for my birthday, is like my gift to myself.
And so like for my birthday, I want to have my book out.
Yeah, that's the goal. And so but like those things are like the ones that I created for it. So it's like, you know, like imagine it's like 1995. These are like things that, you know, in this other version of our world that exists, that I created for the story, that like, again, there's references to superhero stuff and the zombie stories. And again, like I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm wearing a Pittsburgh shirt today, actually. It's just a coincidence, but the zombie story, being from Pittsburgh, we love zombies because that's where, like, you know, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead movies are from. And so like all this stuff that helps add, like, you know, not just like references for the sake of references, but references to hopefully help tell the story in more depth and, you know, really bring it to life in a unique way. So, but, you know, at its heart, it is a superhero story.
So it's kind of a supernatural mix with the superhero. Like,
exactly. That's it. Yeah. The supernatural is the perfect word. Cause like, and even when I was like trying to pitch it to get it published, like I didn't even know what genre. And it was like, it took me to like find the right people to help me figure that out. So.
I mean, you should pitch it to Disney right there. Tell them how much
I
you
know
love
now,
them.
like I just now, well now, yeah, like I just wrote, like I was joking. Well, I just wrote the thing. I don't know. I just wrote it. You tell me what it is. Like
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know, but you actually went to school at USC.
I
You
did,
actually have your degree in screenwriting.
yeah. So that's my background. I went to the USC. So actually, like I have 2 degrees at USC. So I went there for undergrad and then went back for graduate school. And it's kind of funny because since I went there for undergrad, I was in the neighborhood living with a friend, like sleeping on his couch. And I was like, oh, I wonder, what they have for grad school to go back to school. And like, was just kind of like, and so that's when I then like learned about the grad school program for screenwriting. And, I've always loved telling stories and writing. And so that's when I went back to school. And that's like, in graduate school is when this project did first start, and it changed a lot throughout the years. And the novel version actually, I was late to join Javier here whenever I was dropping my daughter off at school. And it's kind of fitting
You're
because
good, bro. You're good. I ain't doing nothing today, anyways.
yeah, the version of this started as a novel whenever my daughter, who is now almost 8, whenever she was a baby, basically like like almost around 1, because she would take naps, and that's when I wrote it as a novel. Like I started as a screenplay at USC in grad school. And with that same teacher I mentioned, Coleman Hough, and I had other teachers too that I worked on different stuff with. But with Coleman, this project is a screenplay, and then I worked on this during Penny's naps, my daughter, and like that's when I was like, I'd hope she would sleep longer if I was like on a roll with the writing, and like if not, I'm like, oh no, go back to sleep. So, and she was when she was little, her naps, it was like it was tough to get her a nap. I'd have to like walk her around. We live in Southern California, so weather was our friend, but I have to like walk her around our neighborhood as long as I could. And like I remember, like I'd look at her, and her eyes would be all wide, and she'd still be wide awake. And I'd be like, I just walked her for like an hour, and then like she'd still be awake, and then just try to get her to sleep. And then you'd get her back to. We lived in. We owned it, but it was like basically an apartment. It was a condo, and we had an elevator up, and you'd like try to like get her very delicately out, and it just this. Bless you. And so all this time to try to like, just get her down gently so that I could just work on the book, like get her to sleep like for a few minutes so I could, get some writing done. And I, like that was when it was worked on as a novel, but going all the way back to USC at that time. So I worked on the novel there, and I worked on another book there. I got to meet Ray Bradbury when I was at USC. He didn't teach there, but one of my teachers was really good friends with him. So it was a great experience. I loved.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really cool meeting Ray. So we went to dinner at his favorite Chinese restaurant in downtown LA, which is really cool. I wish I remember the name of it. I'm sure I could ask. My teacher, he was like, Ray was pretty old at the time, and my teacher was also pretty old, and my teacher passed away in 2020, like not from COVID, but like, kind of like during COVID time. So like there wasn't like any kind of
just naturally passed away.
Yeah. Just so there wasn't any kind of like, we weren't able to like gather at that moment. But there was I'm sure I could find the name of the restaurant. So but it was cool to go to Ray Bradbury's favorite restaurant in downtown LA. So.
And then you also had an endorsement from an Oscar-nominated writer. His name is Tom Perotta. Is
Tom
that correct?
Perotta, yeah, Tom Perotta. And
Tom
so
Perotta.
Tom is the one I said who helped me sort of guide me in the right direction of like sort of understanding the audience for the book too. So I wrote like a draft of it, and he kind of helped me understand like steering it towards the young adult audience, right, and making sure the tone was right for that audience. And Tom's written so Tom. And it was kind of cool because actually it's kind of funny that I kind of forgot this. When I wrote it at USC, my teacher Coleman recommended that I watch the movie Little Children, which was what he was nominated for the Oscar for. So, and the cool thing about that was, which is probably super rare, he wrote the book Little Children, right? And then he was nominated for adapting his own book, which he co-wrote with the director. That I'm sure that's super rare that you get like nominated for, like, he didn't win, unfortunately. I don't remember what won that year. So
just getting nominated is good.
yeah, no, that's pretty cool. But he was nominated for like
Mm.
adapting his own book. That's pretty rad. Like to nominate, like your own work. Like I can't imagine like if someone were to like, let alone this hope, this would be a dream that this, especially since it did start as a screenplay, if it ever had a chance to become a movie again, that if I were to have an opportunity to write the screenplay from it, and then if you were then to get nominated for an Oscar for adapting your own work, that's pretty cool. But he, was adapted his own work, but he also wrote Election. He wrote the book, which he didn't adapt. Someone else did that. He wrote, the TV show, The Leftovers. He did that show. He's done a lot of other stuff, but, it was really cool talking to him because, so like he and I haven't met him in person, but we've had a lot of conversation over the phone. And so a friend of mine who's a producer for stuff on HBO, and my friend's like basically what's called a post-production producer. So he produces stuff like basically, when a show's done, he helps like kind of bring it together at the end. And he connected me with Tom because he's like, I think, he would connect with him because he's a writer and you're a writer. And I was like, yeah, I just finished a draft of this novel, and he helped me like bring it together. And one significant thing was like what at the time was the first chapter, which is actually the first thing that happens in sequence. He helped me realize like, so the very first thing I had in the book was how the corpse boy dies. And now that is now like chapter 17, I think. But he helped me realize like, not to open with that. And so sort of build the tension and move it way back in the book rather than start with that. So it no longer starts with that. But, when I sent him that draft, that was initially the very, very first thing in the book. So that was another really helpful thing from him.
And so I also have you here as the co-founder of a film festival. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my friend Andrew McGregor and Andrew is he was still he has a good friend, but we haven't stayed as close touch. But he and I met at USC, and and he was battling the fires in LA with that were affecting him. So I'm down here in Orange County, so we're not and the fires are still technically going. They're mostly under control, and I know some people lost their houses, but he was up there with that. But he and I founded the festival, and basically the festival kind of like it's all related. I love comic books and storytelling, so it's all related. So the film festival was centered around taking it started out with the focus of taking short films that would make good comic books and then showcasing them for people. And we did that, and we had big events in LA at the Downtown Independent, which I think is now an Alamo Drafthouse theater. At the time, it's an independent theater. But I think the Alamo Drafthouse took them over, and the Alamo Drafthouse I think started with you guys in Texas, and now they're everywhere.
Yeah,
they weren't at the time
like
though.
a million of them here.
Yeah, they weren't at the time though. Now it's out here too. It wasn't before. Because I remember,
like I could talk about those all day. Those are amazing. To go and eat, have a couple of beers, and then watch a movie. You can't really beat that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like before that, like I remember hearing about it when it was there, and it was like now but it wasn't in the Downtown Independence. It's a cool theater, but it's like it is really nice, but it's like a one like room like theater, but it's really nice one room theater, like as nice as it can get. So it'd be like it was a great venue for the event. We did one in Oakmont near Pittsburgh where I grew up. That was a really fun event, and that one we did screened one of George Romero's films as part of our festival. We screened stuff with Jim Henson's daughter Heather is like kind of the indie Henson, and so she has like a lot of independent like puppet films that are like more unique and different and not like your traditional like Muppet stuff. And so we screened
not like the mainstay Muppets that we know.
Yeah, like some of it's weird, some of it's like very artistic and in good ways, but like stuff stuff that wouldn't get like mainstream kind of stuff, but it's all like very interesting. And so that was stuff that was cool to share some of that stuff as part of our festival. It's called Handmade Puppet Dreams, and I think They used to be, up until very recently, on Amazon Prime, but I don't think it's on there anymore. I think it just recently got taken down because I know a friend of mine, my friend Sam Hale, he had his film, which was a short originally called Yamasong, which was one of them that we screened, that was produced by Heather. And then that film was on there. And I actually, it's funny because this is how I learned how, like, you know, even though you buy something on Prime, you don't own it because you technically license it. And so I bought
That's
his
like
film on
everything
there.
though.
Yeah, I bought his movie on there, and then I don't have it anymore. So
Mm.
because it was, when it was taken down, I don't have it anymore because I talked to him. He's like, "Oh, I'll get you a physical copy of it or something," because his then was then made into a feature called Yamasong: The March of the Hollows or something. But it was on Prime and no longer is. But I'm not sure if the other films are. But it was cool. We screened, you know, whatever the current volume of them was in. And we screened those both in LA and in Pittsburgh, and we had an event in Seattle as well. But we were mostly, though, regularly in LA at an art gallery called The Hive, because that was kind of our home base here in California. And we would do pretty much every single month for several years, like events at The Hive. We would have like filmmakers do, like, you know, talks and Q&As, and it was awesome and fun. It was like small events with, like, you know, 10 people-ish, 20 people sometimes, depending. And you couldn't really fit more than 20 people in the space, and the filmmaker would talk and share, and that was awesome. And but it was about, like, connecting, you know, like filmmakers and, you know, directly to an audience, and about you know, just a creative community, but with, like, that center of being like comic books and films connecting kind of thing was how it all started. But we also we never really had the sort of this connection with this that
Like
we
a
wanted.
steady flow. It's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like,
But one of our goals was to have a comic book line that supported charities. And that was a real goal that we never achieved, that I was always sad that never worked, because that was something that both Andrew and I were really passionate about, because Andrew had a nonprofit that he founded prior to meeting me, and I loved comic books. And I also, like, I had volunteered in a group home in Colorado before. So we both had, like, this, like, liking to help people kind of thing, and plus taking our creative passions together, and it just never worked out. It's hard to, you know, it's hard to do those things and make money on it, while, like, you know, we weren't trying to, like, make money to, like, be rich. We were trying to
yeah,
make
you
money
don't
to
want to make
sustain the
money, you just want
company.
to make enough. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to sustain the company, and yet, you know, to while keeping it going. So those were the tricky things. And then, yeah, but it was cool. Like, the events were always really fun to do and stuff. And the real challenge for me was, once I had kids, like, living in Orange County, it was like, okay, it's like, I can't, just the drive from here to LA, because I used to be at every single art walk. I used to be at every single Hive gallery opening, and I was there until, you know, like 2 and 3 in the morning sometimes. And when you have a newborn baby, it's like, okay, I love my, you know, the art gallery, and I love
You
that
try to,
community, but, you know, I love my daughter more. So
yeah. So how does that work? Like, how do you go about selling your book? Like, what do you tell them when it's time to actually go off and spend it to, like, the people that sell it towards the stores? Trying to think of the right wording.
yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, I found a publisher, and it's small press. So with me, it was just a matter of finding the right publisher and the right fit. So I had trouble understanding that, for me, to be honest, because I had trouble figuring out how to categorize the genre, because at first I thought it was horror, but I knew it wasn't horror, my book, right? Like, there's elements. I always, because when I would describe it, I would say, oh, it has elements of horror. And there's one scene in it that you might be able to say is horror, and that's the scene. And I think that's why Tom Perotta, the Oscar nominated writer, like, he recommended moving that scene, because that was the opening scene where, when he dies, and it's not reflective of the rest of the book. Like, it works to make it scary, but it doesn't work when you open with that scene, right? Because the whole book isn't, like, scary like that.
Yeah.
But whenever you build to that, and then, oh, this is how it happened, it makes sense, right? So it was hard to say, oh, it's not a horror book, but it has like, you still have moments where things get scary, like a movie, right? Like, I don't know, think of a movie like, when you were a kid in the 80s or 90s that like even something I love Empire Strikes Back. It's my all-time
You mean
favorite
like
movie.
those teenager movies that just quite you don't know if they're rated R or not, but they're still
Yeah.
PG-13?
Yeah, but you have those moments where like something happens like later and it's like, oh, he's gonna get him, like, and it ratchets up the tension, but it doesn't start right there, right? It happens, it builds to that. So I kind of had to learn that, but then it was like, oh, okay, it's paranormal, right? It's a ghost story essentially. So finding that out, and I think that it's that for me, it's really, I think honestly, now it's to the point where like having had the publisher and getting a little bit of a footing with a footprint on Amazon with getting just a little bit of reviews. Like I've learned that like I now have just 27 reviews, and that's a significant, even though it's not a huge number, that 20 to 25 barrier is actually a significant number of reviews to get, because it makes it much more legitimate than like, not having that number, because then whenever people see it, it's like, oh, okay, some people have read this book. It matters. It's like, oh, okay, no, it's not that no one has read it. Like that means a big deal, actually, even though it's not a huge number. It's enough of a number to say, oh, some people have read it. So therefore, when you are then going to take it to, a bookstore, you have a publisher, it is in somebody's catalog. It's not just, not to diminish self-published books, because there's a lot of great self-published books. I know people who have self-published really solid books, but there's a catalog with other books that are solid. And you have a chunk of reader reviews that are solid. You have, in my case, I have some good quotes from, successful writers and things. So I have like some of these things that validate me. So hopefully now that have established some of those things, when I go to these bookstores, for example, a few months ago, I reached out to the local Barnes and Noble, and they're like, oh, we need you to have this, this, and this. And we need you to be in our catalog. I wasn't in their catalog yet. So I reached out to my publisher, and my publisher's like, oh, okay, we'll do that. And then they got me in their catalog. So that stuff, just like, it's steps that takes time. So then now I'm in the Barnes and Noble catalog. I'm not in Barnes and Noble stores, but that gives me the opportunity to then eventually be in Barnes and Noble stores, if demand increases. And for example, though, because I'm now in the catalog, I can do signings in Barnes and Noble stores. And like, the local Barnes and Noble here, they said once I'm in the catalog, they'd be happy to have me. So things like that.
Great, you should do that.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll be able to. I just I wasn't able to before the holidays, but I've done a lot of signings at local comic book stores and stuff. And I love doing it at comic book stores, because I do also have, I don't have one on my hands. Can I reach one? Oh, I can reach one. So I told you how I'm working on the next comic book that's the superhero one, but I have already created Young Zombie. This is one of the comics that exists within the world of the Paperboy. So this one I've already created. So this one exists, and you can actually find this. I have a publisher of the book. I did self-publish this. So this exists on Amazon. You can experience it digitally right now. And I'm working on a store that hopefully will be up by the end of this week, that you could purchase the print version from me, that I'll have a web store up, because I also want to have like signed books up. I realized like, oh, some people want to buy signed copies, and I've sold them to friends that like, know me. So like I have like I'm like, oh, you can just like Venmo me and I'll send you the money. But I'm like, oh, if people don't know me, like they may not want to like just send me Venmo or whatever. But like, so I have I'm setting up like a proper online store. But like, it's, just like a fun zombie comic where they use Star Wars toys to battle a zombie. And so that's what this one is. And that's a preview of what will be the superhero story called The Burrow. And that'll be on Kickstarter, hopefully again in March for my birthday. So you can, if you want to buy me a birthday gift, buy my comic rather than get me a gift.
Of course,
The fun thing about that is, I was saying how my daughter also collaborated with me. My daughter, when I wrote the first draft of the novel, my daughter was, taking her naps, and now she is older, and she actually did a cover for it. So this is the alternate cover by my daughter Penny. So she is now, no longer a baby taking naps, but my daughter, who is now a comic book cover artist. She loves to draw, so we did since we did the Kickstarter, and so anytime I do events, like, she loves to come with me. So we have her comic book cover, and she signs them for people, and she has a blast too. So, but that's one of the things, like, that's referenced in the book too.
So I want to kind of ask you about your short film, The Illuminator. How did that come about, and what is that?
So the Illuminator is which is also referenced in the book, and it's another superhero story. So that came from I was really into, I had discovered at the time, if you've ever seen the Spider-Man cartoon from the 1960s, the one that was like the one that has the famous Spider-Man does, that the one that theme song comes
Spider-Man does.
Yeah, like, I guess it was maybe like earlier YouTube days, like when, or at least when I first kind of discovered YouTube, like I found that they had the episodes of that up, because it was before YouTube had like longer videos, like, you can post this video as long as, however long we talk for, right? But back then it was like, like they were like, what, 10 minutes long or whatever was the length that it could only be. And I was watching those episodes, and I had this moment where I realized, man, if Spider-Man was really bitten by a radioactive spider, like, even if he got the powers, he'd probably like be sick and dying. That was like popped in my head. And so I started to think about like this superhero that would have these powers, but was also sick and dying. And that is the Illuminator. And so the Illuminator is this character who has these powers that he gets, and in the short film is an animated short film, and he has these powers, and he is also dying, but he's also obsessed with rekindling this love. But part of it is that she loves him too, but she can't sit and watch him die. But he is convinced that with these powers, he can convince her that, like, because of the powers, that they should be together, but yet she doesn't want to watch him die. And so that's the idea behind the Illuminator. And the Illuminator is actually, not only is he in the short film, but this is the Illuminator featured here on the back of the burrow. So he is part of the greater story of the burrow. So if you watch the short film, The Illuminator, you will also see the story of the burrow told in full.
All right, I'm back.
No worries. I'm like, whoa, magic trick.
No, yeah, I touched it. I touched the cord. Like, so I wanted to ask you. So we already kind of went through over. I was going to ask you about what was your future projects that you plainly already came across. Is there any additional future projects that you have?
So the burrow is kind of the next most immediate one. I have a short story book that I self-published a while ago called Today Tomorrow, that I'm going to add a short story, because again, there's a lot of stuff that's referenced in here that I thought it'd be fun with that short story book to add something that's from here. Like, there's one point where like the characters of Daniel and the Paperboy and the Corpse Boy are watching television, and they watch like an old movie called Jacob's Passage, and it's like, describing these choices that the character of Jacob has to make. And I made it up for the book, and it was really cool because when I made it up, my editor was talking. He's like asking questions about it. He's like, I've never seen this movie, but he didn't realize I made it up for the book. And I thought that was like a success on my part, that I created the illusion that it was a real thing. And so I thought, oh, that'd be great to write that as a short story or something. So I thought, like, maybe I'm going to add that short story to that short story book, just to like make it fun. And so, because that's something that I'm going to hopefully do soon. So that's like on the docket. So today, tomorrow, my short story book that'll be updated hopefully very soon. I've been working on that short story. My next novel project, I'm sort of going to be deciding. I wrote. I did a documentary. I have a YouTube channel, Josiah is Right, where I cover like, geek culture, pop culture stuff. I did a documentary on Zen Intergalactic Ninja. So I got to meet, and Bill Mouse, who did the character in the 90s, he actually did this cover for me. And so Bill was a writer and artist of like sort of record of that time. And so Steve Stern, who is the co-creator, of Zen, he and I become close, and he's asked me to write a Zen story. It won't be a comic book story, but he does what they call Zen illustrated fiction, where it's like kind of like Classics Illustrated, if you know those old school books, where it would be like, like pick your old book, like, I don't know, Three Musketeers or something, and then it would have like this part of the story, and then have like an illustration, and part of the story an illustration. So it'd be like that, but like, with an illustration of the character of Zen. So that's one of the next projects coming up. So those are kind of the things in the future, aside from the comic book and aside from, kind of continuing to promote the novel. So those are sort of the immediate future things.
So what advice would you give someone that wants to break into the industry, if you don't mind?
So I guess there's no one path and there's no sure path. I would say persistence is really key, because like it took a long time for me to figure out even what to do with this book. I wrote a completely different version of it and then rewrote it. And I have an entirely another novel that I wrote, and it's still in a drawer, and I hope to bring it out of that drawer. But there was like personal baggage with that. I had a friend who, like the whole, heavy, sad story with that. And so like, don't let those things stop you, like if it's okay to like grieve things in your life, but, and if you need to put a project away, put that project away, but start the next project. And another writer who was, her name's Jennifer Smith, and she's like a young adult writer that's had a lot of success. And I talked to her recently, and she gave me really good advice. She's like, once you finish that book, once you finish this book, whatever the book is, think about the next one. What's the next one, and I have a couple, like, I haven't narrowed down which one I'm going to focus on, but I have a couple of books that I'm like starting, right? So it's like, okay, what is the one I'm going to focus on working on? So think about that as you work, but just persistence, because it took me a while, like trying to, I reached out to a lot of publishers, a lot of agents. I never landed an agent. I found a publisher without finding an agent. And I've had conversations with agents without success. I've had, conversations with agents that I thought it was going to go well, and it didn't. I have the conversations with publishers that it seemed interested, and then I just didn't hear from them. So like every time I was hopeful, it went bad. And then finally something stuck, and I found the right thing at the right time. And, don't be hasty, take your time with it, find something you think is the right fit. That would be my advice, but persistence, I guess, would be the advice in a word.
So everybody knows we're gonna have all the links and descriptions and everything. That way they can find your book and they can very easily go and purchase it.
Thank you,
And
Javier.
normally, how much do they run, if you mind me asking?
What's that?
How much does normally book cost on Amazon?
So on Amazon, the book is $15. So the book's 15, yeah. And then like if my web store for anything signed isn't up yet, but if it is up, the signed versions are 20, and then the comic books physically would be 10. The only reason that the signed versions are 20, by the way, is slightly more because I have to pay to ship them to myself. So like whenever I buy a book from my publisher, and this is true for bigger publishers, by the way, even though mine's a small press, you have to buy your own books. So you and bigger publishers do give writers an advance, but people might not know this. That's an advance against royalties. So you get an advance, but then you have to like sell a certain number of books to like basically, check that box. So in most, more successful writers, it's like almost a guarantee, like the famous writers, but like, depending on if your like book doesn't do well, you might have to pay that money back if you're like a lower level. But for me though, it's like, that's why this will cost, if should you be interested in the signed copy version, it's basically costing more simply because I'm paying, like I have to pay to get it to me back and forth. So I'm like, essentially like, there's that
So
extra
they're
cost.
shipping it to you,
No,
and
yeah,
then you have to sign
it's a
it, and
slight
then
pain
you
in the
ship
butt. Yeah,
it. Yeah.
exactly. So that's all. Just like, because I always feel like I'm not trying to like charge extra. It's like I just have to like
Mm-mm.
account for the extra like hassle of cost and time. So, but it is only 15 on Amazon. And you can get it on Barnes and Noble. And Barnes and Noble, the pricing is a little bit different. The pricing, it's a little bit more there. So you can get it there as well. It's like 16 or something there, but it's just because of like the way the pricing works out, the way they pay out royalties are always different per publisher, and I don't know exactly how it works. But whatever platform you prefer, it should be there. It's on like but mainly on Amazon. Amazon is your best price, so get it there for 15 flat.
Right.
So
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Did you have anything else you want to say before we
I
leave
think
off?
I'm good. I think I covered it. You had good questions. I appreciate it, man.
Yes, sir.
You were patient with me being a little bit late dropping off the kids at school. So